Hello and welcome to KoshienCast, the world's best and only sports anime fan podcast. My name is Matt, and joining me today is a special guest, Matt.
Hello.
So this is episode 0. This is just an introduction to the podcast to give an overview of the concept of how we hope this podcast will work and identify a couple things about us, your hosts, Matt.
And Matt.
So first, I just wonder, Matt, if you could talk to me about the definition of sports anime. We're focusing this podcast strictly on sports anime, but that's sort of an abstract term. It doesn't have necessarily a set definition. How would you distinguish a sports shonen or a sports anime specifically as being separate from other kinds of anime that are sort of operate in the same vein?
Okay. Well, first of all, I would say what largely distinguishes the two is the structure, generally. A sports anime is generally focused on building a story based around a very specific tournament structure, or a very specific structure that the character must follow in order to achieve their final goal. For example, the classic series that would do this is Hajime no Ippo, or Fighting Spirits for you diehard Geneon fans out there. So in that series, Ippo is training to be basically the world's greatest boxer. He's trying to see how far he can take himself with boxing. And within that series, it is solely focused on the sport of boxing. And in this we see Ippo progress through a very rigid tournament structure that the series, for the most part, always follows. Ippo works his way through the Japanese national rankings into the world rankings,
Right.
but the grading for it is always the same. In a battle series like, say, Naruto, the structure for victory is always changing. So, for example, in Naruto, there is an arc about the Chunin exams, where Naruto has to pass various tests in order to basically graduate to the next rank, which is Chunin. And within the Chunin arc, there are various different tests that they have to follow. Like, say, like an actual, paper test that they have to figure out how to, that they have to get good grades on, to getting lost in a forest and finding their way out, etc., etc. And then, in a later arc, that's about saving his friend Sasuke, who's being taken away by the character Orochimaru, and the entire setup there is based around saving Sasuke. Now, these arcs oftentimes follow the exact same, I would say, pair-up structure as sports series do. The difference is that the quote-unquote tournament is always changing, and what qualifies for the tournament. For example, again, using the Naruto example, in the Chunin arc, it's basically surviving.
Right.
basically getting through, basically succeeding in whichever test is set out, whether it's a test of brains, it's a test of survival, it's a test of sheer strength, etc. Whereas during the Save Sasuke arc, it's about taking down each of the different, followers of Orochimaru that are trying to basically keep Naruto and his friends from saving Sasuke.
Right, but
in a series
it's not a tournament in the way that Ippo would be fighting a boxing tournament.
Right. And that's the thing, because it is always following that same structure.
Ippo.
Now, it seems like kind of a silly thing to point out. Or kind of maybe a bit too picky, considering the fact that, the big difference is that Ippo's boxing and Naruto, they're ninjas using magical techniques.
Right.
But it is interesting to point out that something like, say, a series like Yakutate Japan, which is a sport, which I would say is a sports series that is based around baking bread.
Right.
Because it does still follow this same structure, where the grade is always whether or not the food tastes good. So maybe I shouldn't say, so much the structure, so much it is the form of grading never changes.
Right, so I guess the parallel is, it's almost a little simplistic, the way I'm understanding you, is that it's a sports anime or it functions as a sports anime if the combat or contest in the show plays by the same rules every time, just like a sport. You know, in the same way that the rules of baseball don't change from game to game.
Right.
As long as the rules of baking bread and how you win baking bread or whatever competition it is in a show don't change from arc to arc, then it's functionally operating as a sports shonen or a sports series.
Right. And that's what I would generally say, because using another very similar series that I would actually say is not quite a sports series is the recent Food Wars. Because in that series, while there is a tournament format, there are oftentimes parts in the series where the battles are actually not necessarily about taste, but it is also based around, like, for example, serving as many meals as they can, or whoever can attract more customers or foot traffic. A lot of times it does come down to taste, but there is a mild distinction there.
Yeah, there's not just one way to win in Food Wars.
Right, correct.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. So I guess that's sort of... I mean, these terms are a little bit malleable, but it does give a good way to distinguish a battle anime in which, on some level, everything's on the table. You know, something more traditional like Dragon Ball Z, sort of a quintessential shonen battle anime, in which you just win by being stronger, but there's not set rules to every match, and they add new elements every time.
Right, exactly.
Whereas, essentially, even though, you know, Ippo may learn new techniques while he learns to box, it's not as if the rules of boxing have changed any. He's just operating in different ways within those rules.
Correct.
So clearly, I think I'm basically with you. An anime that doesn't center around a sport that exists in the real world can still function as a sports shonen. Or a sports anime. And I just want to clarify, I use the term sports shonen to specify the genre. It usually refers to anime that are geared at younger male audiences, although that's not strictly true, and although some series may be aimed at younger male audiences, they may have a big audience that is female or older. It's the only reason that I use the term shonen as opposed to simply sports series is that there are sports anime, or there are anime that are centered around a sport that are, you know, their inherent structure is not about becoming the best athlete or taking your team to nationals or whatever, which is sort of the traditional trope we associate with sports shonen. So I guess by that, the definition we're talking about, there are anime that are centered around sports that wouldn't be sports shonen because they wouldn't be about being the best, about, you know, entering tournaments and whatever. They can be slice of life, they can be romantically driven, or they can be comedy series, or any number of things. You know, I think of Ping-Pong the animation, which, while it's centered on the sport of ping pong, it's more about the character development and coming of age and maturity, and it's not, the point of the show is not watching any one character become great at ping pong. So I think as we work on this podcast in the future, that'll be something we'll keep coming back to. How do we define it? But I am interested if we can just take a step back into what got you and I into sports anime in the first place. You know, Matt, I've known you since grade school, and so a lot of our enthusiasm for anime in general and sports anime specifically we've learned it together. For me personally, I got into sports anime because of a show you've already mentioned, which is Hajime no Ippo, or Fighting Spirit. You know, back when I was first getting into anime, I wasn't very... I, like many of my peers, got into it because of Toonami. I was just watching it on cable. I didn't really keep up with the nascent anime community online, so I only knew a little bit about what more was out there other than what was on cable. But in high school, we started going to a store in Lafayette where we could rent anime for $1 a piece on Tuesdays. One DVD for $1. So we started doing that, and we ended up just doing it for years and years for throughout high school. And
pretty much just whatever stuck out.
Absolutely, yeah. So we would rent any series that sort of piqued our interest. And of course, at that time, I didn't really have a good way of gauging what I liked, since I didn't know anything about anime. I was still learning, so I just rented everything. I would gauge my interest in an anime based on the trailers that were included on discs of other anime.
Which was something that was very unique to you, because I never did that.
Yeah, I enjoyed the trailers, and somehow I enjoyed getting caught up in them. I thought it would be fun to decide what I was going to do next based on a particularly good trailer. So clearly that basically lost function. I don't think it's a big selling point for anime Blu-rays these days. That was a big incentive for me. If they had a good trailer, it was good enough for me.
Right.
And so that's how I ended up watching Fighting Spirit, because it had a pretty funny, interesting trailer. And so I rented it from Vaughn's, and I ended up watching through it. I really enjoyed it. And after that, at the time I didn't think about sports anime specifically as being its own genre that I should pursue. But over the years, I just watched a lot of anime in general. And what I found at a certain point, especially in recent years, is looking back, the series that I most enjoy coming back to, the series that I enjoy watching in big chunks at a time, tended to be sports series. There was something about the structure of sports series that kept drawing me back in, and I would always look forward to watching it in a way that I didn't necessarily look forward to other genres, at least not quite so often. So I think that's there's something about it that stands out, and I keep I wanted to start this podcast mostly to incentivize myself to learn even more. So anyway, Matt, I'm interested where you date the beginning of your sports anime fandom.
Well, much like you, for me it was also Hajime no Ippo. Now, for me it was slightly different because when Geneon was going out of business, Right Stuff had a massive DVD sale. The best DVD sale, where it was basically you could buy 25 Geneon DVDs for basically $100. Now, for people who don't know how anime generally worked back then, that was a steal back then, because it used to be like $20 to $30 per anime DVD. Yep. And like for like five episodes at most. Yeah, if you were lucky. A lot of times you're looking at 3 to 4. Yeah. But Hajime no Ippo was actually like 5 episodes per DVD. I specifically remember that. But so I essentially just went ahead and did that because you had told me such good things about it. And I know at the time there was an old anime site that we used to go to that doesn't actually exist anymore. Yep. Called Anime Academy. Yeah. Where apparently everybody there just loved it.
Yep. And that was good enough for us, right?
And that was good enough. And yeah, that was good enough for us. So I decided, screw it. Yeah, I'll just buy it all. I'll just buy it all in this deal and throw in some other random DVDs I didn't care about. Yep. And then from there, it's like, kind of like you, it's like, yeah, I really enjoyed it a lot. Like, I absolutely love that series. I didn't really think too much about it until I actually started reading manga again. Like, there was a period in my life I got really, really into manga. And one of the ones I know that stuck out to me in particular was I was reading reviews online specifically on Anime News Network for iShield 21. And I had seen that it was getting, like, crazy good scores. Like really high grades. Huh. Not because they use grades, not scores. Right. But, and just on a whim, I decided to check it out. And I just loved it. And that to me is really the series that, like, defined structure of sports. Because that was really the one where I really noticed that there was a structure to these series.
Yeah. It didn't just happen to be about sports.
Right. Now, technically, I got into the manga. I actually don't really like the anime very much, but the manga...
You don't like the anime for iShield, you mean?
For iShield, okay. Yeah, sorry. I don't really like the anime for iShield, but I love the manga, and that's and you'll find a lot of times that the anime and manga are roughly going to be about the same.
Yep. Well, oftentimes the anime functions just as an animation of the manga. It takes all the main story arcs, all the beats, which usually is for the best.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Ice Shield had some other issues that made that anime not particularly memorable. But okay, well that's good to hear. It's sort of, there's a lot of parallels. I think for both of us, we realized that we liked sports anime well after the fact that we'd watched several.
Right.
You know, we weren't identifying up front that there was something unique about it. It's probably only in recent years that we've realized, oh, there's something about this that is unique and that is uniquely appealing. Yeah. So specifically, I don't know if you have a list, but what would you say are some of the sports anime that stand out above the crowd for you personally?
For me personally, Hajime no Ippo is still probably my favorite.
Sure.
It is what got me into it, and it helps that it's also really freaking good.
Yep, it helps.
Ice Shield definitely as well. I would probably put as my number 2.
The manga.
And then otherwise, I would probably say, like, more recently, I would say probably, like, it certainly counts because it follows into the structure, but it kind of goes back to what we were talking about stuff that doesn't quite fall into actually being a sport, is Chihaya Furu.
Yeah.
Which is actually like, because that's actually not really a sport, it's a card game.
Yeah.
It's like a traditional Japanese card game, but it still follows that same structure that we discussed.
Yeah, I enjoyed Chihaya Furu as well. I think I might have gotten you into that one, actually.
Yeah, no, that was the one you definitely told me to read, and I think I got more into it than you did, actually.
Well, you followed on and read the manga after the fact, yes, but...
Yeah.
I
got really invested in that series.
That was one of the first series you watched on Crunchyroll, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that is correct.
Wow, I'm glad I'm such a positive influence. Yeah, those are all good. I have enjoyed all 3 of those myself. For me personally, I think Hajime no Ippo, it's just sort of in the same way that I find it difficult to say that anything but Cowboy Bebop is my favorite anime ever because it's been my favorite for so long. Right. It's hard for me to say that anything will ever unseat Hajime no Ippo as my favorite sports anime.
Correct.
Moving beyond that, though, 2 that come to mind are relatively recent. The first is Baby Steps.
Oh, yeah.
Which I know you've recently just finished.
And adore, much
adore.
like you.
It's a really special anime about tennis. It has a terrible title. The title and the main character's haircut are the worst things about it. But other than that, it is an amazing show, which really defies a lot of sort of the stereotypes and I would say low expectations of sports anime, in that the characters act very human, and the sports, the action itself as portrayed seems very realistic.
Right.
There are exceptions to that, like, you know, there's a tennis player in the show who plays by trying to create paintings with his shots.
I knew exactly where you were going with that.
I mean, there are some things that are a little, like, eye roll, but for the most part, it's very realistic. It plays with very real human emotions. The characters are subtle, and something that's especially important for me, because you don't see it a lot, is that there is the female lead is just as complex and interesting as the male lead.
Right.
Which you don't always get in sports anime, unfortunately.
Right.
And then the third one I can think of at the top of my head would probably be Ace of the Diamond, which is a relatively recent baseball anime. What I like about it is something that a couple different baseball anime do well. I know you and I have both watched Big Wind Up. It does this well as... it shows the strategy of baseball, because I'm personally a big fan of the real sport of baseball. I watch the Chicago Cubs pretty attentively, and what I love is that it portrays what's special about baseball, which is the fact that there's always tension, because since baseball doesn't operate on a timed clock, You never know when there's going to be a massive reversal. So there's always escalated tension, even if the team is winning by a large margin. So I think that show portrays that sense very well. And it also just has some really fun and memorable characters, and it's an easy anime to watch a lot of quickly because it draws you in extremely well, and the pace is good.
And I think that's the one major one of yours that I have actually never seen, and I am going to sit down and watch it soon.
Yeah, it's a winner. But yeah, that's good. What I hope, sort of as we move forward with this podcast, those are the kind of shows that I'm going to be balancing against. So if I'm going to be looking for a sports series that is truly exceptional, those series are the things that I sort of define as truly exceptional. And some of the ones that you mentioned are also absolutely exceptional in my mind. So that's sort of the bar that I set for an exceptional sports series, and I'm looking forward to seeing more that rise to that level. So I want to just discuss briefly the structure of how we hope this podcast will work. So moving forward, I hope to do a weekly roundup. So we're beginning the fall 2016 anime season. So I hope to do a weekly episode with you, Matt. Just
of course
running through the most recent episode of every currently airing anime that is centered on sports. So like we discussed earlier, some of these shows may not fit into our definition of being a sports shonen. They may not have that traditional tournament structure. But as long as the series is centered on a sport, then we'll watch it. And we'll provide updates on it, we'll provide analysis, and there may be other series that, like we discussed, are not centered on a real sport in the real world, but have a sports structure, or a sport anime structure. And so we'll take those case by case, and then possibly do those as well. So every week we will be looking to upload an episode on the most recent episodes of sports anime. And then occasionally, I hope also that we'll have the opportunity to go back and do some series reviews for sports anime that have come out in the past. Either ones that we both love, like Baby Steps. I'd love to do a Baby Steps episode because I have a lot of thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
Or go back and do more historical sports anime, sort of pull something. I'd love to do something older, like Aim for the Ace. It's really, the challenge would be being able to actually find a way to watch it legally. But find some older sports anime, maybe Deer Boys or something, slam dunk.
Or something like Captain Tsubasa.
Yeah, and just something that we haven't seen before, and be able to do a series review of that. So some weeks, hopefully, we'll have 2 episodes where we can do a series review. Going into fall 2016, I think we're going to be pretty busy because we've got 6 or 7 sports shows. I didn't expect there to be that many, but here we are. The sports as a genre has really grown recently, and so that's an after effect. And I guess that leads into my last question. With the growth of sports anime specifically, what are you, Matt, hoping to get out of this show that we're doing together?
Well, Matt, what I am hoping for, honestly, is I'm kind of interested in seeing how the structure evolves. Because, we kind of talk about how sports anime has kind of exploded, but it's also never really left. And it's kind of interesting, just from my experience, even just like going back and watching stuff like, or reading stuff like Hajime no Ippo and Eye Shield, and comparing it to stuff now, which tends to be like stuff like that, which used to be focused more towards like gearing towards kids and like young boys, to nowadays where it tends to focus on more an adult women crowd.
Yeah.
With stuff like Free and Haikyuu.
Yep.
So I'm really interested in seeing and kind of analyzing how it's changed while still maintaining that same structure. Because I think a lot of times people look down on the notion of something being a formula.
Yeah.
But the formula exists because it works.
Yeah.
It's comforting.
Yep.
And there are ways you can still follow that same formula and still make it interesting and still make it fun.
Yeah, I think I'm sort of in the same boat. One of the things I like most about sports anime is the formula, that there's some predictable tropes. And as I was thinking about this show, I thought that there's sort of a lot of similarity in what I like about sports anime and what I like about sports period. Because, like I mentioned, I follow the Chicago Cubs baseball team pretty attentively. But every baseball game is the same. There's always 9 innings. Especially when you're following one team, you're pretty much watching all the same players. So what's fun about it is watching what's unique, because every game is unique. But it's sort of on the margins. There's little things that are different about every baseball game, and it's fun to be able to pay attention to those and identify those small things that are different and make each game special. And I think that's the same for sports anime. Although there may be a general tournament structure, there is a distinction of what makes one sports anime work and what makes a different sports anime fail. So I'm looking forward to exploring that and also just identifying some of the differences of how modern sports anime work as opposed to traditional. Just a brief note, like you mentioned, sports anime are geared more at women nowadays than they've ever been. I was looking on Anime News Network. They had a listing of shows that Japanese fans were most looking forward to. For female fans, the #1 show was Haikyuu, which is an anime centered around a high school volleyball team.
Right.
For men, that was the 4th most anticipated show. Where, so it's interesting that the traditional demographic has shifted. Although neither of us are women, we still enjoy it. So it's interesting to see what appeals to different people.
Right. And I mean, I think that's the thing as well, is, because the thing is, sports anime has always kind of appealed to both genders, but it's just shifted more that they're realizing now that it has largely appealed to both genders, because one of the big classics back in the day, Slam Dunk, I mean, because that was in Shonen Jump, and it was specifically written for guys, and they didn't realize how big of a female fan base that series had at the time.
So now they're just actually playing to it, and
right.
Yeah. So anyway, it'll be interesting for us to explore those dynamics. I'm interested in just spending a season, an anime season, which is a 3-month period, and watching every sports anime, being able to compare them to each other, and also compare them historically. I think this is gonna be really fun.
Yeah.
All right. So, Matt, before we wrap up, do you have any parting thoughts?
Let's do this.
Yeah, I agree. All right. So, that concludes episode 0. Thank you for listening. And until next episode, everyone, keep training.